Cleopatra VII, one of the most famous and complex figures in history, was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. She is often remembered for her political acumen, romantic liaisons with Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, and her tragic end. Cleopatra's life, however, has also been the subject of significant historical and cultural scrutiny, particularly regarding her heritage and identity. Cleopatra's background and ancestry. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE in Alexandria, Egypt, into the Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt since the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE. The Ptolemaic dynasty was of Greek origin, founded by Ptolemy I Soter, a general of Alexander the Great. Over the generations, the Ptolemies maintained their Greek and Macedonian heritage, with each ruler adopting the title Pharaoh but remaining culturally Greek in many ways. However, Cleopatra was unique among her Ptolemaic predecessors in her active embrace of Egyptian culture. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn the Egyptian language and present herself as the legitimate Egyptian ruler, tying her image to the gods and the rich cultural legacy of ancient Egypt, African heritage and controversies. Although Cleopatra was of Greek and Macedonian descent, scholars, historians, and geneticists have debated her potential African heritage. Many historians, especially those who have explored the African roots of prominent historical figures, have speculated about Cleopatra's potential African ancestry, specifically through her maternal line. Some researchers, such as those exploring the African heritage of ancient Egyptians and their rulers, suggest that Cleopatra might have had some African ancestry, though it is unclear to what extent. The most notable discussion of Cleopatra's possible African heritage came from the work of scholars like Dr. Malefikita Santi and others who have argued that Cleopatra as a ruler of Egypt was closely tied to the African continent, regardless of her Greek-Macedonian lineage. They propose that her identity as the Queen of Egypt and her association with Egyptian culture may have overshadowed her Greek ancestry, positioning her within the broader African context. Additionally, scholars like Dr. Ronald C. Rogers have explored the possibility that Cleopatra, in her efforts to legitimize her reign, may have embraced her Egyptian heritage more fully than her predecessors, which could have included connections to Egypt's ancient African lineage. The debate over Cleopatra's race has been contentious for centuries, particularly within the context of race and identity politics. Some argue that Cleopatra's mixed ancestry reflects the diverse and complex history of Egypt and its interactions with various cultures, while others emphasize the Hellenistic, Greek heritage of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Historical accounts and portraits of Cleopatra, such as those made by Roman coins, depict her as having Hellenistic features, often with Mediterranean characteristics typical of her Greek ancestry. However, many modern scholars argue that the portraits and sculptures could be idealized images, which do not necessarily represent her true physical appearance. There has been ongoing discussion about the racial politics of how Cleopatra is portrayed, especially in popular culture, where she has been depicted in various ways, sometimes more aligned with European features, and other times with African or Egyptian elements. Cleopatra's role in African heritage and identity. The question of Cleopatra's African heritage ties into broader discussions about African identity and the representation of African figures in history. By framing Cleopatra as a key figure in African history, some scholars and cultural commentators have sought to correct centuries of misrepresentation and marginalization of African history. Cleopatra's legacy, especially as an African queen of ancient Egypt, plays a pivotal role in the reclamation of African history, especially in the context of diasporic African identity and pride. Cleopatra is an important historical figure, not just because of her reign, but because of her symbolic role in the African and African American cultural imagination. The discussions surrounding her African heritage reflect the desire to assert African cultural ownership over significant historical narratives and challenge the long-standing Eurocentric portrayals of ancient history. Conclusion: Cleopatra VII remains a fascinating figure whose life and legacy continue to inspire debate and scholarly investigation. While her ancestry is firmly rooted in the Hellenistic Ptolemaic dynasty, Discussions of her African heritage, especially through her cultural practices and symbolic ties to Egypt, remain a significant part of modern interpretations of her reign. This exploration of Cleopatra's heritage invites a broader reflection on the complex intersections of race, identity, and power in ancient history. Please share, like, and subscribe Oran Z.